Why do you believe software companies need to rethink how they support AEC firms beyond just delivering a product? Because that's ultimately what you sell, but there is more to it, right?
The world is changing at a pace that's faster than before. I mean, you can look at any sort of take 10,000 foot view of how the pace of change is evolving, and it's both technology and just how people are evolving. Software companies can't really succeed unless they are heavily investing in their customers, both from a technology standpoint and in a servicing of those customers. So what do I mean by that?
Did you know? Nearly 70% of AEC firms say their software tools actually slow them down. Clunky systems, poor integration, and limited support leave teams managing the very inefficiencies they hope to eliminate. In this episode, I'll be talking with Daniel McCormick, Chief Revenue Officer at BQE Software, about why solving these challenges isn't just about better software, it's about better support. From boosting operational efficiency to adapting AI, workforce shifts, and generational change, Dan shares how AEC firms can future-proof their growth through the right tech strategy. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC AI and Tech Strategy Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, it's now time for our conversation of the week with Dan McCormick. Dan, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Nick, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And again, another unique perspective for the audience, and Dan's got some, I think, really good pieces in store for us, so we'll just get us kicked off here. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired your transition from high-growth startups to helping AEC firms run more efficient businesses through software?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'm one of five boys. I love high energy environments. Always have, I think I'll find that we wind up working in spaces that somehow emanate from where you came from. And certainly software companies are rapidly evolving, sort of fast paced. So you kind of have to stay ahead of the tech curve. So I think it kind of, there's a gravitational pull here. But yeah, funny enough, I started off in sort of the financial worlds, transitioned to venture capital backed companies. Groupon, I was one of the first 50 employees at Groupon before leaving to found my own company, which was venture-backed, and we grew very quickly over a 3-year run from 3 founders to 250 employees. But ultimately, venture-backed companies are investing money that they're not earning yet. So they're investing ahead of the revenue curve. And that was a little too chaotic. Using a poker analogy, you're all in every year, and if you don't hit your projected revenue numbers, it's bad for employees. You have to do cuts. It's bad for customers, and so ultimately, we sold that company. I started getting more in the software, like stable software growth company. So, the past 10 years or so, I've been within sort of the construction and sort of pre-construction, ranging from co-construct and builder trend for those viewers who familiar with that space. It's residential construction software, so sort of project management. Co-construct was purchased by Builder Trend. I was retained to run co-construct for a couple of years there. Then I transitioned over to the commercial space, and then most recently to BQE, where I run our sales and delivery teams. So I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at BQE. And so, as I think about this sort of career arc for me, a couple of things. I mean, I love the high energy. I love that the industry and the technology is constantly evolving. And, not for nothing, but it is rewarding and appealing to know that the software that I'm helping to run and help to build on behalf of our customers is leading to customers who actually build the world around us. It's an inspiring thing you just walk down the street in any construction project, you can kind of say, I wonder if they're using the software we're building for them. So at any rate, I think the fact that it's constantly changing is certainly part of what's drawn me to it, and just inspired by the customers that are building the world each and every day.
Which is a great point, Dan. And I think, like we were chatting about earlier, I think people who may come into, let's say, the commercial design and construction space, not super familiar with what we do, but have the sense that, no matter what you're building for the end users who are in the space, like you're really seeing a tangible benefit on the world. And like you said, you can just walk down the street and see it, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah, and really quite for me, quite juxtaposed to the first 5 years of my career where I'm sitting in front of a computer looking at numbers and making trades and financial analysis all day, every day. So far more rewarding, and I'm grateful to have the opportunities that I have right now.
And speaking of those, those AEC firms that end up, being end users, right? So it's interesting because you guys are essentially building software primarily for the A and the E, right? Professional services firms. So why do you believe software companies need to rethink how they support AEC firms beyond just delivering a product? Because that's ultimately what you sell, but there is more to it, right?
Well, yeah, and I think I kind of alluded to it a little bit. I mean, the world is changing at a pace that's faster than before. I mean, you can look at any sort of take 10,000 foot view of how the pace of change is evolving, and it's both technology and just how people are evolving. And so we think and firmly believe that software companies can't really succeed unless they are heavily investing in their customers, both from a technology standpoint and in a servicing of those customers. So, what do I mean by that? AI is impacting everything everywhere. And you fast forward a year from now, and guarantee it will touch more things than we even recognize right now. If your technology, if your software partner isn't investing in how that can help your firm, then you don't have a good technology partner. And if you take the fact that's just one element. I mean, AI is one thing. There's technology associated with optical character resolution where it can read receipts and expenses and vendor invoices and auto populate into the system. There's all kinds of these sort of modern tech things that change and get better each and every quarter that goes by. Your software company needs to be investing in that, and then you signed up for the software a couple of years ago. If you think of it as set it and forget it, you are there's lost opportunity there. There's a lot of value to every single year. Take a second and review what are the trends that are going on, what's the new technology that could be leveraged to improve efficiency within your firm, to improve employee retention, to reduce the headaches that tends to go on within A&E for sure. It's certainly construction too, although as you alluded to, we're more A&E focused in construction these days. And so we believe that software companies if you look at a software company, there's an ongoing investment in technology that sort of should happen. Not all players actually do that. They tend to collect your check each year and then don't do anything for it, except sort of bigger profit. And then they also have to invest in ongoing resources to make sure that all customers are always have access to ongoing education, to training, to user groups, external partners. God forbid you lose your controller and you need a plug and play someone who knows how to operate BQE for you, so it doesn't disrupt your business. That's the sort of myriad investments that we make and are big believers in. That we see a lot of other software companies not doing that, and we think they're digging their own grave, because it is the software company's responsibility as they collect a payment from you every year to redeploy that revenue to help grow your firms. And you just can't do that if you're not doing a heavy investment both in the tech and the resource at your disposal, so that, God forbid, you go a couple quarters and you don't change anything. It's pretty common. You are able to circle back, learn what's new, improve operational efficiencies continually as you map this out over a 5 or 10 year run. Especially within our space, we are seeing that there's a lot of other providers out there that are lacking in that kind of ongoing investment, both in the tech and in the service side of things.
And I think Dan, you brought up a great example, just one of many that I'm sure you have, right? Using optical character recognition for expense reporting. I mean, just think if you have to do this thing manually, you got to snap the picture, you got to enter the numbers. When you think about it from just a billable perspective, imagine, it being done in a matter of seconds or minutes versus the manual entry every 2 weeks, and then what that could end up looking like. Hours of time just wasted, and then how does that compare to the investment that you're making in the software? And that's just, like I said, one of many.
Yeah, yeah, well, right, and it's the how can the technology enable seamless transfer of information so that you don't have financial teams having to talk to project managers 5 times a week to figure out what you can invoice when the information should all be there. So you don't have project managers who are hounding, or maybe some administrative person who are hounding employees to get their time and expense in. These are areas where technology should make it easier, should reduce the amount of wasted hours, improve the actual data collection. We're all humans. We'll make mistakes. You put your time and expense in, you mistag it. So you need a proper review process. But the technology really can and should be easing strains for all employees at all times. And you include mobile with some of the OCR technology and some of the AI learning that you can do. The future is a bright place to actually build operational efficiency, but it's one step at a time.
Yeah, and like I said, and personally, right, like I'd love to see basically natural language to a timesheet, right? Because it's nobody likes doing it, but you can just say, hey, I worked on this for an hour, I worked on this for 2 hours, or whatever the case may be. Which that's a good lead into our next question, Dan. So, what common misconceptions do AEC firms have about operational efficiency? What are some practical strategies that can help them improve without overhauling basically their entire operation?
Yes, this is a good question. I think like there's a couple of different ways you can kind of approach it, but I think the number one thing that I would say is sort of a crawl, walk, run approach, or think of it as evolution, not revolution, because the world is constantly changing. Every year there's something new that you can probably lean in on and drive operational efficiency. But if any given time you're saying, okay, I want my entire team to learn how to do resource allocation. This is a 10-year run on resource allocations, for instance, where firms are like, I want to get better at this. What tools do we have? You talk to any project managers anywhere, big or small firms, they're still predominantly doing that via Excel and whiteboards and a Monday meeting where you're like, all right, what are the deadlines we have to meet? The world just changed from last week. I need, Frank, you're going to go out to this job because we got a deadline on this one. So like, let's reallocate our hours. There are tools out there to do that. But if you're thinking about having your firm holistically change how they are carrying out their work, it is very disruptive. It is risky. Your employees won't really like it. And so as you think about building operational efficiency, think about my advice is each year carve out a little bit of bandwidth within your firm to incrementally improve. And we've certainly built BQE in a way where you don't have to adopt everything and throw out how you used to do it. You can just take incremental change and apply it. Think of it as a small fraction of your time each year that you're diving in and setting the objective to improve, and just take the next step instead of trying to holistically change everything. So I think that's a little bit theoretical and high level, but it is the number one thing. Like we get customers all the time that are like, okay, now we're going to learn resource allocations. And I'm like, well, how are you doing it now? I'm like, well, we're not really doing it right now. And that's a tough thing to just holistically learn right out of the gates.
Dan, which even speaks to just knowing like how your business runs and like what process you have, and just throw the tech or the tool out for the moment, and just being able to say, yeah, this is how we do resource planning. This is how we do reviews and design packages before they go out the door. Knowing how your firm operates, then you can bring in the tools to actually make that process more efficient. Because if you're right, leverage goes both ways. It can be great if you've got the right system and tool in place, but if you have the wrong system and a tool in place, leverage goes the other way.
Yep. Well, the other thing is the software that you leverage, the technology that you leverage should supplement your current processes to build efficiencies. It shouldn't overhaul your product. Like sometimes it's necessary. Don't get me wrong. Like there are instances where you can argue for, all right, we need a revolution on how we're doing things within the phone. But most of the time, it's around like, how are we currently doing things? And then if you take something, a software like a BQE, and you apply BQE to those processes, so that we're not changing how people are doing things, you're just building little efficiencies along the way. Then everyone starts to gain some billable time back in their days. And the other thing is a lot of what we're talking about is a pain in the butt for a lot of people, right? Like it is a nuisance. It is a not. Do people really get excited to sit down and do their time and expense reports each week? No. Do the people who are creating the initial drafts of invoices really enjoy all the work that goes into figuring out what that you can invoice for? No, usually they'd prefer to have those 4 hours back, or take it from 8 hours down to 4 hours, right? Um, so yeah, I think the software should be able to improve your current processes, not force you to holistically change your entire firm.
And Dan, as we've discussed a little bit earlier on our chat, kind of before the show started, and you even mentioned this, as things change year to year, right? This very well could be the most rapid change of pace that we've seen in some time. So how is BQE helping AEC firms stay ahead of significant shifts like everybody's favorite topic, AI, but also workforce changes and growing global competition? Because we can all tell, right? They're moving in an industry that is traditionally resistant to change.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us should feel alone, like in the industry. Like I would argue that a lot of industries are in a similar boat. Like, well, it is daunting and scary how fast things can change, and that there obviously there's the sort of draconian fear of like, is any of this change going to kill my business? So I think what our approach is, look, if you talk to anybody that tells you I know exactly how AI is going to impact my industry or the world, they're lying. I mean, they're like, just welcome out the door. They're not they're not credible, but it will impact things. So the point is, what is your technology company doing, or your partners doing to help you stay ahead of those potential changes? So like AI for us, first of all, like we've had it for a couple years now. There's an embedded AI chat function, so that rather than having to call into support, you can, within both the mobile app and the web interface within Core, if you've got questions about it about how you're operating, it is remarkably good. Like my when I have new employees start, it's one of the exercises, because you just put yourself in the shoes of the customers, you give them some training on the product, and it's like, now troubleshoot. Like and so it can read it can read, like, understand how you're using the system and give you the guidance on how to optimize based on your question. So it's a sort of a cut above what, dating back 4 years ago, anybody would be able to access in terms of internal support. There's also, this is more futuristic, but just to give you an idea of things that we're investing in. I'm not saying they're necessarily 100% going to work yet. I mentioned resource allocations, and this is a bear because it's a dynamic, depending on the type of firm, it's typically a very dynamic staffing and planning process where you're trading around hours. And if you look at a 50 employee, 200 employee firm with some people can do some elements of the work that the company's doing, and others are more junior that can't do it. The trading around hours is one of those where, if you're sitting there and saying, for this week, I need to optimize around X, Y, and Z, leveraging an AI tool to do back-end analysis rather than having your PMs trying to juggle around the hours, is one of the areas that we think could be a huge unlock. Candidly, I don't think that's coming in the next year or two. I think there's some additional technology that needs to be in place before that really unlocks. But like, when that hits, it'll be a game changer for a lot of firms. And then, the other thing is, with advanced analytics, the process of looking at data for A&E firms, like in the Deltek ecosystem, it's like, wait 4 months, pay 30 grand, and hope that it looks okay. More modern infrastructure tools like BQE, you still have to think through, what is the formatting and how do I want the data to be represented, so that I can actually see in real time how my firm is performing, or how my employees are performing, or which phase the project is most profitable. That, combining AI with some of the advanced analytic and data display tools that we're building, we think could be a pretty big unlock for owners of firms too. Excuse me. So the point is, it's a heavy area of investment. It's one of a number of different sort of thematic things we're looking to continually apply to the software, just to make people's lives easier.
Well said. And I think Dan, some of this is as this evolves and changes over time. I think you're also going to see different personas, different experience levels, perhaps adapt to the change differently. So, what generational shifts do you see in the AEC industry? And how can leadership effectively adapt, especially when there's adoption of new technology, but also keeping in mind, right, what makes the business up, which is people?
Yep. Yeah. So look, it has been going on for a while, but there's certainly the baby boomer generation is sort of retiring, and there's a lot of firm owners who are retiring, selling their firms or passing their firms down to the next generation. And that's an interesting shift because if you think about that, you're talking about a generation who grew up on zero technology to a generation who grew up entirely on technology. And so the impact there is you wind up with a lot of firms who are just like the owners were the type of who was like, there's no way I'm going to invest any money in software because the company's doing fine. And then it's run by someone who's like, there's no way I'm not. So as you stand back and look at the amount of firms that are leveraging sort of Excel and maybe a QuickBooks for their accounting, it is every year going down pretty precipitously. It's just fewer and fewer firms that are trying to wing it on solutions that weren't custom built. Like the dollars invested relative to the output that you get in these is from these increased productivity is pretty dramatic. So certainly that's one generational shift, and the other one that is it's actually sort of the next generation down from the current owner trend is the new entrance to the workforce. I mean, the owners are used to technology. The new generation of the workforce, I mean, it's a little disturbing. They just operate mobile. Like the phone is in their face. It is always in their face, and always has been. And so we actually think mobile is kind of an old story too, but like it's never been more pertinent within A&E than now because this generation, like if you can't do it on the mobile device, like enter time and expense, automatic expense capture, mileage tracking, make it really easy for them to enter time so that they can be on vacation somewhere and they get notified, hey, you're late on your time expense entry, and they could just go in and do it. If you don't do that, you actually risk like employee churn. So, like there's two sort of generational shifts that happen, one at the ownership level and one at the entrant level that we're seeing pretty profound impact on certainly tech adoption, but just how you operate your business.
And I think and as I would say that middle between, right, so maybe the current ownership that's retiring, the next generation is the one that these firms are being passed down to, and then those who are entering the workforce. I think you got to be careful because in the same way that you think it's crazy that your predecessor has no tech stack, the people entering the workforce think it's crazy that you think mobile is just like a fad, or like, hey, just do it at the desktop, right? It's just two outcomes of the same symptom of an older generation thinking the younger generation has no idea what they're talking about. But if that's the trend, right, and that's what customers are demanding, which you guys have a pretty good gauge on, then there you go.
Yeah, well, the other wrinkle is clients. So as you do want to look good to your clients, and sort of a no tech stack approach to carrying out your work. At the end of the day, like especially for the firms that are really good at design, that's still far away number one. But in a competitive environment, like looking more tech forward is a very helpful thing these days in terms of winning new projects and just in terms of client satisfaction.
Especially when, right, if you and that's true if you view technology as kind of like a leading indicator of a positive outcome for a client, which some clients do, some clients don't. It just all depends. But now, so Dan, we've talked about, right, so client satisfaction, retention, tech stack is a couple of topics so far. But what other ways do you measure long-term success in helping AEC firms grow and stay resilient? And then can you share what that looks like in practice, or maybe give some examples?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first of all, before we get some of the sort of customer examples, we are we're probably annoying at some point in time. We're constantly tracking feedback. We have NPS for customers aren't familiar. That's Net Promoter Score. It's just a pulse on how customers are reacting to our product and services that constantly go out to all of our customers. At the end of implementation, as you sign up, we're constantly asking like, how did that go? So we're constantly keeping tabs on not just like a numeric feedback, but also the comments and like how is it improving their firm sort of productivity. And obviously we keep tabs on account growth. So if you're adding a bunch of seats, that's generally a good thing. So like engineering's had a really strong run. I could tell you. Our architecture post 2008 architecture has been stable, but not as sort of strong as engineering in general. So we do keep tabs on that. But like in terms of like tangibly, like what are examples where we can see the impact of leveraging a software like BQE Core, none more pertinent than what we've seen over the past 4 months. So we can monitor usage, and so what we will see sometimes this day and age, this quarter, if you will, the impact of tariffs or the uncertainty associated with international trade is certainly impacting on firms. Some projects go on hold. I don't know what the cost of my supplies are going to be. I don't know where I'm going to get them from. It can delay projects. It can kill projects. It just creates a whole bunch of uncertainty that's pretty difficult for firms to navigate. And there's sort of a hold on and see type of approach. What we also see is there's a subset of our customers that are leveraging our CRM module. So for edification for the customers, you can build your projects, you can apply your time and expenses to those projects. That information flows into your invoicing. And that's sort of the tripod of value within BQE Core that firms usually start with. You can then do stuff on top of that, like resource allocations, there's an accounting module, stuff like that. What happens when your projects slow down? You got a lot of employees, you still need to be driving revenue. What we've seen for a lot of those firms is when you have access to a professional CRM module, they invest more time in winning new projects, spinning up proposals. And so it gives them an agility to tackle what's happening in the world around them and be agile when you have those tools under one tech stack so that you can shift some of your time spent to winning more projects instead of just operating on current projects. So that's, it's like a tangible example of how long-term success comes from being able to, tackle profound challenges that are hitting your firm and the agility that you can gain by leveraging software is something that we kind of pride ourselves on. So it's been interesting to see over the past 3 to 6 months.
Which, that brings up the point of, call it interoperability between, you gave, QuickBooks and Excel as the example, right? Like two systems that maybe don't talk to each other the best, but at least with your guys' approaches, firm-wide management software, all these different modules communicate with each other in some way. But as you mentioned previously, the beauty to me sounds like if you're only ready for one module today, and maybe tomorrow it's the second or third, you kind of decide what fits your specific situation, and then you guys are kind of just there when they're ready.
Yeah. We crawl, walk, run is what we frequently reiterate to customers as they're going through implementation. You can lean in and do a whole bunch of change all at once if you want, but the hardest thing is getting your employees to change how they are doing things. And so again, that frequently is a misstep if you're trying to change too much too quickly.
And you need to balance, obviously, right? Like you have the demands of the business today. You can't just drop everything down to have, right, like process mapping sessions and training for 8 hours plus a day. Like you still have a business to run. But I do think like, the owners of these AE firms with, some guidance and perspective are the best ones to make that decision, because really, who knows their business better than they do?
Oh yeah, that's right. And the other thing is you stand back and look at the entire industry, even if you just stay on engineering or if you just look at architectural firms, there is an extreme amount of variability on how firms are carrying out their work. Because look out at the world, there's an extreme amount of variability in the projects that need to happen. Someone's building a commercial skyrise. In other words, the civil engineer who's doing work out on the road. Like, it is fundamentally different. That has survey firms are just, it's a high velocity of invoicing, a high volume. So there's a lot of variability there, and like the firm owners will know that in their bones because that's how they live. But again, like the software you adapt really ought to reinforce your current processes and just build efficiencies over time.
And that's and well said, Dan. I like to call it, right? It's you go in search of a solution that fits your process and not the other way around.
Yep.
But Dan, this has been a great conversation, and we'll leave the audience with this last question. What final piece of advice would you offer to AEC professionals that are looking to embrace technology and build more future-ready firms?
You don't have to know, as an owner of you specialize in your company. You don't have to know all the tech trends. What you should be thinking about is, what is the partner that's going to help me stay ahead of whatever's coming over the next 5 years, from a software standpoint. And if you combine that piece of feedback, like think about the next 5 to 10 years of your business, and know that like there's no way that any one human, like that you need to stay like on the front lines of what's happening more in your industry. Software technology is when you have to trust your software partner. Think of it as a partnership, and you have to feel that partnership as you go through that process. So if you combine that with this notion that you don't have to change everything at once, if you're switching off of a current system and adopting a new one, just copy your current processes in the new system first. So find number one piece of advice is you stay ahead of the tech curve. Is you don't have to know all of this. You have to trust in your software partner to be staying ahead of it. And number two is if you trust in them, then like don't try to create holistic revolutionary change within your firm. Just incrementally improve operational efficiency each year.
And well said, Dan. And to summarize, right, for the firm owners is like, you're an expert in your business. Do you need to know the inner workings of, right, like how does a large language model work in the back end? Probably not. Should you know about how it can be directly applied to your business in a very practical way? Yeah, and there's resources to help you out with that.
That's right.
Beautiful. Dan, thank you again for taking the time to join us on the show today. If the audience wants to catch up with you, maybe follow up on some of the points of discussion from today, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, email is always good. Just dan.mccormick@bqe.com. And they can also reach out via at bqe.com, our website. There's any number of prompts to engage with members of my team. So if you happen to do that, let them know that, hey, I heard Dan talk, and tell them to hop on a demo with me at some point. I'll be glad to meet folks.
Excellent. Dan, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Until next time. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.